Beijing rolling out the red carpet for world leaders, complete with dancers along the route and lights. President Obama would come down that route there. And when he got out, as is tradition, he was wearing a Chinese silk robe. But there was something else, something the world did not see. What China did before leaders even got there, hoping the world would look the other way. ABC's Jim Avila traveling with the president.
It was a red carpet never seen before. Chinese limos arrived carrying leaders from 21 Pacific Rim nations along a neon LED red carpet that lit up as the dignitaries approached. President Obama, part of the show, donning a dark purple silk tunic. Other world leaders, including Vladimir Putin, wearing similar outfits provided by the Chinese that seemed more familiar to a dance club than a world summit. Putin and President Obama met only briefly and did not discuss any of the serious issues dividing them. The traditional fireworks were not the only show. All of Beijing treated to a rare glimpse of blue sky in the notoriously polluted capital. The government has been temporarily cleaning the air, enticing government workers to leave town with paid 6-day vacations, shutting more than 800 surrounding factories, and keeping off coal-fueled home heating across the city despite freezing temperatures at night. Sadly, that clean air lasted only a couple of days. The air quality warnings are back, and we can no longer see those blue skies.
U.S. President Barack Obama has urged China to be a partner in underwriting international order, not undermining it. Obama reiterated that a successful China was in the interest of the United States and the world. The American president also called on Beijing to reject the use of cyber theft for commercial gain and create a more level playing field where foreign companies are treated fairly. He spoke to business leaders at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC Forum. Obama's official visit to Beijing comes at a time of growing China-U.S. friction on a range of topics, including trade, maritime issues, and cybersecurity.
Now, I believe the world is at the crossroad, historic crossroad. China, Russia leading this new global movement to balance the power in the world so that they can build a new world order where no more unilateral, aggressive, or even colonial methodology being put into a sovereign nation. Or some may say the world is at the brink of either being subdued or overcoming the U.S. NATO military intervention to Iran. If Russia, China, or these SCO, the alliance are weak, so that not enough to stop the U.S.-led NATO military aggression in North African regions.
China and the New World Order. This is a topic that I've been researching in one form or another for a few years now, in earnest for the last few months, and in absolute incredible detail in the past 2 weeks. And I have a doozy of an episode for you today. If you think this podcast has been informative or data-packed in the past, you ain't seen nothing yet, so let's roll up our sleeves and get to work on constructing today's narrative. And it starts in a position that I think most of us will be familiar with. If you are even glancingly looking at the headlines this day and age, you will note that there is an undeniable, a demonstrable buildup of diplomatic, financial, and military tensions between the NATO powers on one side and China and its allies on the other.
Now, new warnings over cybersecurity and the growing cyber war between the U.S. and China. U.S. officials charging members of a shadowy unit in the Chinese military, accusing its agents of stealing trade secrets from American companies.
And the Chinese government has hit back. They summoned the U.S. ambassador to China, Max Backus, for a dressing down, and they've also called these allegations extremely absurd.
In recent months, China has undertaken destabilizing unilateral actions asserting its claims in the South China Sea. We take no position on competing territorial claims, but we firmly oppose any nation's use of intimidation, coercion, or the threat of force to assert those claims. The United States will not look the other way when fundamental principles of the international order are being challenged.
Beijing quickly reacted to the accusations and denounced Hegel for singling out China at a public venue. The Chinese official also said the speech was completely non-constructive and full of hegemony, threats, and intimidation.
The Treasury is once again criticizing China for failing to let its currency appreciate against the dollar and for the rapid buildup in China's foreign exchange reserves, saying in this report, quote, both the rigidity of the renminbi, another name for the yuan, of course, and the reacceleration of reserve accumulation are serious concerns which should be corrected to help ensure a stronger, more balanced global economy.
Tomorrow there will be a formal announcement that Australian dollars can be directly traded into renminbi, into the Chinese currency RMB here in China. The third currency in the world to do so after the US dollar and the Japanese yen.
This is another small step in China's campaign to increase international use of its currency. China has launched other new currency pairs in recent years, including the Canadian dollar, Malaysian ringgit, and Hong Kong dollar. The deal is meant to help promote business between the two countries by allowing trade without using the U.S. dollar as an intermediary.
A U.S. Navy patrol aircraft was stalked and then repeatedly buzzed by a Chinese fighter jet in international airspace this week. Pentagon officials are calling it dangerous and unprofessional.
The U.S. and Japan issued strong statements of concern over the issue, and on Tuesday, the United States confirmed that it flew two B-52 bombers over China's newly established air defense zone, as well as the disputed Diaoyu Islands. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki on Tuesday expressed U.S. concern over the issue. When asked about whether the United States' action should be viewed as counter-provocation, Psaki refused to comment.
This phenomena, as I say, is fairly self-evident even if you are only looking at the headlines of today's news. But if you are only looking at the headlines, then you might have missed a very different set of data, indicating a very different and perhaps directly contradictory narrative, one that paints China and its supposed foes in the West not as allies pitted against each other, but as partners, however uneasily, in some sort of alliance that will set the tone for the 21st century.
Evelyn de Rothschild joins us now to talk about investing in China and his latest venture, Weather Central, here as well. So Evelyn, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I just want to get your views on how things have evolved. Has it become a more open society? Has it become an easier place to do business?
Oh, I think it is, no doubt. I think it's a remarkable country. When you think of what has happened in the last 10 years, let alone 20 years, is an achievement beyond recognition.
I'm Richard Rockefeller. I'm chair of the board of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. The sentiments that my grandfather and grandmother and actually other relatives of that generation had for China, very positive feelings for the country, passed through the generations to all of us. So China, in a way, wasn't such an unfamiliar place to us as it might have felt for a lot of Americans.
What sort of a financial deal should Obama be seeking to strike when he travels to China next month?
No, I think this would be the time, because you really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order, financial world order.
So Evelyn, what about the RMB situation? You mentioned a so-called currency problem. I mean, do you see the day in the next 5 years where it's fully convertible and flexible?
Well, you're talking to a person who's quite old. If I'm around in 5 years, I'd like to think that that is the case. I think we've all got to move towards that opportunity, and I think the challenge also is whether we should move towards an international currency.
But they really are issues of the construction of a new world order. That's what this is about. And that's the sort of dialogue the Chinese are generally good at. And so a partnership between us is essential. A conflict between us is going to exhaust us both in tactical exercises that cannot be conclusive.
And the New World Order could satisfy both.
It has to satisfy both, because otherwise it will lead to tensions that will exhaust us both.
With the West pushing Russia further away, Moscow securing a historic pivot to Asia.
Having signed hundreds of billions of dollars worth of deals, Russia and China are closer than ever before. Should the West be worried? Did it fail in its proclaimed mission of isolating Russia? And are all the sanction threats just undermining trust in the dollar?
Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard announced in Shanghai on Monday a new currency exchange program with China. She said China has authorized 2 major Australian banks to be market makers for direct trading of China's yuan and the Australian dollar. The banks chosen are the Australia and New Zealand Banking Group, ANZ, and Westpac Banking Corporation.
Tomorrow there will be a formal announcement that Australian dollars can be directly traded into renminbi, into the Chinese currency RMB here in China. The third currency in the world to do so, after the US dollar and the Japanese yen.
This is another small step in China's campaign to increase international use of its currency. China has launched other new currency pairs in recent years, including the Canadian dollar, Malaysian ringgit, and Hong Kong dollar. The deal is meant to help promote business between the two countries by allowing trade without using the US dollar as an intermediary.
This is a huge advantage for Australia, not only for our big businesses, but also for our small and medium enterprises that want to do business here.
China is Australia's biggest trading partner, with combined two-way trade of 120 billion US dollars.
The dollar collapse will be the single largest event in human history. This will be the first event that will touch every single living person in the world. All human activity is controlled by money. Our wealth, our work, our food, our government, even our relationships are affected by money. No money in human history has had as much reach in both breadth and depth as the dollar. It is the de facto world currency. All other currency collapses will pale in comparison to this big one. All other currency crises have been regional, and there have always been other currencies for people to grasp onto. This collapse will be global, and it will bring down not only the dollar, but all other fiat currencies, as they are fundamentally no different. The collapse of currencies will lead to the collapse of all paper assets. The repercussions to this will have incredible results worldwide. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. It supports the global economy in setting foreign trade, most importantly the petrodollar trade. That government then grows larger and larger, enriching its minions with jobs to control their fellow citizens. Finally, to come full circle, the government then controls other nations through the military-industrial complex. This cycle will be cut when the mathematically and inevitable collapse of the dollar occurs.